Masechet Nedarim Daf Samech Chet. We're talking about the law that a na'ara hame'od asa, a girl, let's say she's 12 years old, and her father marries her off, so she does kiddushin only. She's still living in her father's home, waiting for the nisu'in, at which point she will move in with her husband. If she takes a vow at that point, what is the law? This was not explicitly stated in the Pesukim, so we know the law from the Mishnah is that both the father and the husband both have to annul the vow in order for it to be annulled, right? She is tied to both her father and her call it the groom, her husband, future husband. So how do we know that? We saw one derivation yesterday. That was in the name of Rabbah. That's what we saw yesterday. But some versions have Rava with an Aleph, which we're going to see today. So Rabbah or Rava, learn it from the series of these three laws. And since it says Vimhayo Tihiyeh, so we understand that Tihiyeh to be Kiddushin. And so the first paragraph teaches us that the father annuls, and the second paragraph teaches that the husband annuls. And we understood this to be talking about the same case, and therefore is teaching that both the father and the husband have to be there and annul. All right, that was the derivation of Rava. But now we're going to see a second derivation. Deber bishmel tana ben ish lishto ben av lebito mikana namorasa shavio baala mefirin nedareha. So this from the school of Rabbi Ishmael. We learn it not from the three cases here, but rather from the summary pasuk all the way at the end of the chapter that says this is the laws that Hashem commanded Moshe regarding vows between a man and his wife and between a father and his daughter when she is ne'ara in her father's house. So where Rabbi Ishmael is learning that this entire pasuk is talking about a case when she's a ne'ara in her father's house and she has kiddushin to another guy. In that case, you need ish le'ishto, you need the husband to annul it, and also the father to annul it. That's it, just this pasuk, and leave the rest alone. All we need is this pasuk to derive this law. All right, so that's an easy, clean derivation. Now we ask, Kultana Deber Ishmael, im hayot tihyeh leish my abid le. Well, in that case, since you learn everything from this pasuk, then what is this case here, right? I mean, we know in the father's house, meaning if she's unmarried, the father does it alone. When she's fully married and living in her husband's house, then the husband does it alone. But then what would this case be? Im hayot tihyeh. And doesn't that sound like a case of kiddushin? And so you already know from here that in the case where she has kiddushin, but she's a na'ara, you need both. So what will this law come to teach us, according to Rabbi Ishmael? And the answer is, Mokim le'idach de Rava. This is needed for the other law of Rava. This is a law we're going to see in a couple of dapim. This law says that if this na'ara me'od asa, who was in her father's house, she made a vow, and then the groom died. And the groom didn't ratify the vow. Let's say he didn't say anything. He died, and now, if she wants to, in order for that vow to be annulled, the father can do it alone. Right? And we're going to see this further. Since when they're both alive, the father and the husband have to do it. If the husband dies, then the father alone can annul it. That's what we need this pasuk for, right? That the father alone can do it. Im hayot tihiyeh. That's what it's teaching. Okay, we're going to see later how it teaches that. Okay, Verava, hi detane deber Rabbi Ishmael, my abid le. And how about Rava? What is he going to do with the pasuk all the way at the end of the parasha? That's an extra pasuk. What is he going to use that? What is he going to learn from that? Rava, by the way, he actually learns two things from hayo tihiyeh. Since you have two words here, you can actually learn both, that when the husband is alive, the husband and the father have to annul it. If the husband dies, then the father alone can do it. So he uses this pasuk for double duty, because there are two words. So what is he going to do with this pasuk at the end, which is simply extra? And the answer is, this teaches that a husband can only annul vows that has to do that where the content has to do with their relationship. A husband does not have power, authority over his wife for everything. If she says, I vow I'm not going to read any more Stephen King novels, they're too scary for me, he has no right to say, I annul that vow, you have to read them. This is her own personal decision. It has no effect on him, right? Only things that will affect the marriage, like if she says, I'm not going to your parents' house. I'm not going to cook dinner. So things that relate to the marriage, relate to him, those he can undo. But things that are her personal prerogative, he cannot undo. So that's what we learned from this pasuk. Since it says ben ish liishto, only if the content is related to the relationship between the husband and wife, only then does he have a right to annul it. The Rishonim wonder. The Gemara doesn't say. What about father and daughter? Does that a limitation also apply? Can a father annul any vow of his young daughter, or is that also only if it affects their relationship? If the daughter says, right, I'm not going to get you your slippers anymore, Dad, right, so that affects him, he can undo that. But if she says something that's just about herself, then the father cannot do it. So that's a good question. But for sure, regarding husband and wife, that's only if it's related to the relationship. All right. So now that we got those two derivations down, we have a question, and the answer to this question is going to take us all the way till the end of the daf. Ibayalehu Baal megaz gayiz or maklish kalish. The question is, let's say a husband only nullifies the vow, and the father did not nullify the vow. Could be the other way around also, but we're asking it just this way. So what is the status of what's left of the vow? Is it megaz gayiz? Lagoz means to shear or to cut. Does it cut the vow in half? And so now she has only half of a vow? Because she needs two people to annul it, so now it's half. Or do we say maklish kalish, that it weakens it the entirety to 50%? In other words, to give an analogy, if you have a house and you have two heaters in the house, right? If they're both working, then the whole house is nice and warm. If one of them breaks, well, it depends how it's set up. Does the front of the house get cold and the back of the house is fully hot? Right, that would be megaz gayiz, right? That half of the vow is 0 and half of it is 100%. Or are the two boilers intermixed, such that if one breaks, then the entire house will be only half hot. It will be only 50% of the heat available. So that would be the miklish kalish, that she has a vow on her. The entirety of the vow is still valid, but it's a weakened form of it. So here we're going to give an example of an actual vow. So what would be a case where this would apply? She says, I'm not going to eat 2 olives. It could be olives or olives worth. All right, I'm not going to eat 2 kizetim of carbohydrates. Veshama arus vehefer la va'achal tanun. And then the groom heard about it and said, I undo this vow. And then she goes and eats both olive-sized amounts of that bread. So she eats them. So she violated the vow. So, but it is half undone. So what is the status? If you say it cuts it, it's half of it fully applies and half of it is 0, like half the house is hot and half the house is cold. Well, then she would still get flogged for one of the kizetim. That's sufficient for her to violate the vow. And say, even though the husband undid half of it, so okay, one of the olives was permitted, but the other was fully prohibited, and so she would get lashes on the fully prohibited one. That's why I have to say that she ate both of them. Let's say we don't know which one is which. Even though the husband removes half of the application of the vow, so that one of the kizetim are permitted and the other olive is prohibited, she eats both, but the prohibited one is fully prohibited, so in that case she would get lashes. That would be megaz gayiz. But Yamrinan Maklish Kalish Isura Ba'almahu. But if we say that but the husband annulling the vow, but the father still didn't annul the vow, that reduces the entire application to 50%, right? So it applies to everything, but in a weakened form. Well, since it's a weakened form, she does not get lashes at all, because the vow is now too weak to deserve lashes, but is still prohibited. So this is merely a prohibition. The prohibition applies to both, but it's too weak because half of it was undone by the husband. So that would be where the entire house is only at 50% heating. All right, so that's the question. We want to know the answer. The answer is going to be, it's a machloket between Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, and we're going to see that from the end of the following baraita. But first we have to go through this long baraita. The baraita is going to present 5 cases. The cases have only very subtle differences, so it's worth introducing actually with the Mishnah that's going to come up in a couple of dapim that gives the basic law. The basic law is that the father has more power over the daughter than the husband does, such that should the husband die, then she makes a vow when they're both alive. Then the husband dies. The father, in most cases, can annul the vow completely without the husband. Since he died, now that right, that authority reverts to the father, and the father can undo the whole thing. That is generally true in most cases, but the other way around is not true. If she makes a vow when they're both alive and then the father dies, the husband does not have the right? That authority that the father had does not transfer over to the husband, so therefore the husband cannot alone annul the vow. That's the basic principle, but we're going to see it applied in 5 different cases. So here we go. Tashema. When did we say, it's quoting the Mishnah, which said that if the husband dies, then his authority reverts, is emptied out and goes to the father. So when the husband dies, the father has all the authority. Well, that's true. Bizman shelo shama habal kodem sheyamut, or sheshama v'shatak, or sheshama v'hefad umet bo bayom. It could apply in 3 different cases. When could be when the husband didn't even hear about the vow and he died. So he didn't hear about the vow. He had no chance to do anything. He dies, the authority goes to the father. Or he did hear about it, but he was quiet, or he heard and he annulled, and he died on that day. These 2 cases should be switched around. I'll show you in the couple of manuscripts that we have. It's the orders in the other way. Oshe Shama Vehefad is first. That makes sense. So the second case is where he did hear about it and he annulled it and he died. Well, then that's an easy case. That should be easier. If where he didn't even hear about it at all, the reverse to the father. When he hears about it, annuls it, and dies, then certainly it was already annulled. We're going to see that when someone annuls it and dies, then the annulment isn't really good anymore and has to be redone because it wasn't annulled both at the same time. But here, certainly it would be better, and so the reverse to the father. The third case is that he did hear about it and he was quiet. Now, if the husband heard about it and was quiet, and the day passes, then it will stick. But we're talking about a case where the day did not yet pass. That's why you have to switch around the order. So it will be Oshe Shama Vehefad, and the third case, Oshe Shama Veshatak Umet Bo Bayom. So he did hear about it at 11 a.m. He didn't say anything about it, and he died at 2 p.m. Still the same day. If he were alive, maybe he would have annulled it at 3 p.m. So just the fact that he was quiet until he died does not prove that he would not have undone it, and so his shetika, his being quiet, still leaves it up in the air. And so in any of those cases, once he dies, the father can alone annul the vow. And that is the case that the Mishnah mentioned. If the husband dies, then the authority all goes to the father. That's the first case. Aval, im shama v'kiyem, or shama v'shatak, umet bayom shela'acharav, and yachol lehafer. However, even a father's authority is limited in the following case: if the husband heard about it and he ratified it. Remember we said yesterday that that's another option, right? The husband can, the groom here, can hear about it and say, oh, that's a good vow. I authorize it, right? And so once he did that, then the father will, and he dies, then the father will not be able to undo it. Or if he heard about it and it was quiet, and then the day passed, and he only died on the next day. Since he did not annul it on the day that he heard about it, then it takes effect. That's like ratification, and from then on, even if he dies, the husband dies, the father cannot undo it. All right, now case number 2. Shama aviha vehefer la velo hispik ba lishmoa ad shemet ha'av. So she makes a vow while they're both alive. The father hears it, and the father annulled it. But the husband did not yet hear about it, and meanwhile the father died. This would be the other case in that very same Mishnah, that when the father dies, it does not transfer over to the husband. Because the husband didn't even hear about it, so the possibility of him nullifying it at the same time did not even come up. And so the father, even though the father did nullify it while he was alive, but we saw yesterday that they have to nullify it at the same time. Doesn't mean that exactly the same time, but within the same time frame, because the husband didn't even know about it at the time that the father annulled it. So that's not within the same time frame, right? The husband was not even aware of it. In that case, even though the father died, that's it. It sticks. Even though the father annulled it and he died, nevertheless the husband has no authority over annulling the vow. Third case, Shama ba'ala vehefer la velo hispika av lishmoa ad shemet ha'baal zohi sheshaninu met ha'baal nitrokena reshut la'av. The third case is the opposite of the second, where the husband heard about it and the husband annulled it, and the father never heard about it. And meanwhile, the husband died. So she makes a vow while they're both alive. Only the husband hears about it, annuls it right away, and dies. And then the father hears about it. So in this case, even though the father did not hear about it until after the death of the husband, and so it was not within the same time period, doesn't matter. This is another application of the husband dying, and the authority all goes to the father. That's the power of the father. The father has more authority over the daughter. She's living in his house. And so once the husband dies, that's it, he's gone out of the picture, and the father can then do the annulment for both of them once he's dead. All right, that was the third case, and now the fourth one. Shama ba'ala vehefer la velo ispika av lishmoa ad shemet en habal yachol lehafer she'en habal mefer ela beshutafut. So now the husband learned about the vow, and the husband annulled it. But the father did not hear about it before the father died. In that case, the husband cannot undo it. Now, even though the husband already undid it, but the father never did, and now the father is dead. And so this is a case where the husband cannot undo it, because he can only undo it in partnership. So once again, she makes a vow while both of them are alive. The husband hears about it and undoes it, but the father never heard about it, and he died. So then certainly he had no possibility of annulling it, and he never did annul it, and he died. So that's it. The authority of the father does not transfer to the husband. And finally, Shama aviha vehefer la. She makes a vow when they're both alive. The father hears about it, annuls it. Velo ispika ba lishmoa ad shemet. But the husband did not hear about it, and meanwhile the husband died. So chozer ha'av mefer chelko shel baal. In this case, the father annuls it a second time on behalf of the husband. Right? So it's not like when the husband dies, then it's like he never existed. No, that's not true. Because she made the vow when both of them were alive, both of them would have to annul it. And the fact that the husband, he didn't even hear about it, and he died, but nevertheless, his share, he still has a share in it, but that share transfers to the father. And even though the father annulled it already while the husband was alive, he would still need to nullify it again in order to nullify the share of the deceased groom. That's one opinion. Amar Rabbi Natan, hen divrei Bet Shammai. This, what we just said here, that's only the opinion of Bet Shammai that says that the father can nullify it a second time on behalf of the husband, and then it's nullified. However, not everybody agrees. Bet Hillel omrim en yachol lafer. Bet Hillel says no, the father cannot nullify it. In this case, even though he nullified his share, but the other share that belonged to the husband, and he never even heard about the vow, and he died, that the father cannot do. Okay, so now this is what we were waiting for. Shemat mina lebet Shammai megaz gayiz, lebet Hillel miklash kalish shemat mina. So we can derive from this that according to Bet Shammai, it's cut in half, right? It's half the building is hot, half the building is cold, and so to here, when the father annulled the vow, he annulled his half. Okay, that's completely annulled. And then the husband still has to annul the other half, but he died. When he dies, that full power vow over half of the item transfers to the father, and the father can then annul the other half. That would work, and that's why he can do it again. But Bet Hillel, who says you cannot nullify, why not? Well, here's why. When they're both alive and the father annuls it, he reduces the whole thing to 50%. Okay, very good. But only the husband can reduce the rest, the 50% across the whole thing down to 0. If the husband dies without having nullified it, then there is no transfer. The vow is not even powerful enough to go and transfer over to the father because it's just too weak. It's like hardly even a vow. You wouldn't even get lashes for it. But there is still a prohibition. So kind of paradoxically, because it's so weak, it cannot transfer over to the father, and therefore the father cannot undo the rest of the 50% strength of the vow, and so that would be the opinion of Bet Hillel. So that's the answer to our question that we asked. It's a machloket Bet Shammai, Bet Hillel, shemat minah. Baruch Adonai leolam, amen ve'amen.